Ser Barristan Selmy, known as Barristan the Bold, is widely regarded as one of the greatest knights and swordsmen in the history of Westeros, having served in the Kingsguard for over 40 years across the reigns of multiple monarchs. His legendary status was cemented at the age of 10 when he disguised himself as a mystery knight at a tourney in Blackhaven, and though quickly defeated, he earned the attention of King Aemon V, who predicted the boy would one day wear a white cloak. At 16, Barristan slew Meleys the Monstrous, the last of the Blackfyre pretenders during the War of the Ninepenny Kings, ending a rebellion that had threatened the Seven Kingdoms and securing his place in history as a warrior of exceptional skill and courage. Throughout his service, Barristan demonstrated not only mastery with the blade, but also an unwavering commitment to honor and duty, even when those he served proved unworthy of such devotion. During Robert's Rebellion, Barristan fought at the Battle of the Trident, where he cut down numerous rebels before being gravely wounded. Yet even in defeat, he earned Robert Baratheon's respect, who pardoned him and appointed him Lord Commander of his Kingsguard. His skills remained formidable even in his advanced years, as demonstrated when he effortlessly cut through multiple Sons of the Harpy, while protecting Daenerys Targaryen and Meereen, wielding his sword with such precision and speed that younger warriors could scarcely follow his movement. Barristan's fighting style emphasized technique, discipline, and economy of motion, making every strike count and wasting no energy on unnecessary flourishes, which allowed him to remain deadly well into his 60s, when most knights had long since retired. His reputation was such that even Jaime Lannister, widely considered one of the best swordsmen of his generation, openly admitted that Barristan could cut through the Kingsguard like carving a cake, suggesting that even in old age, the Bold remained unmatched in pure swordsmanship. Ser Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, wielded Dawn, a legendary greatsword forged from the metal of a fallen star, and passed down through House Dayne to those deemed worthy of the title, making him perhaps the most romanticized and feared warrior of his era. Dawn, unlike Valyrian steel blades, was said to be even lighter and sharper, forged from a pale milky white metal that gleamed like no other sword in Westeros, and in Arthur's hands it became an instrument of death that few could withstand. Eddard Stark himself, who witnessed Arthur's prowess firsthand at the Tower of Joy, stated that he would have been dead if not for Howland Reed's intervention, acknowledging that Arthur was the finest knight he ever saw and that no man could stand against the Sword of the Morning in single combat. The Tower of Joy confrontation, where Arthur and his sworn brothers Sir Oswell Whent and Lord Commander Gerald Hightower faced Ned Stark and 6 companions, became legendary precisely because it took 7 men to bring down 3 Kingsguard, with only Ned and Howland surviving the encounter, demonstrating the lethality of these elite warriors. According to witnesses, Arthur fought with a fluid grace that made his blade seem to dance through the air, striking multiple opponents simultaneously and defending from all angles with such speed that his enemies could barely track his movement. Jaime Lannister, who served alongside Arthur before Robert's Rebellion, considered him the best swordsman he'd ever seen, rating him above even Barristan Selmy in pure combat ability, though acknowledging that the gap between them was razor thin. Arthur's dual-wielding capability was also noted in some accounts, where he could fight with both Dawn and a second blade, simultaneously creating a whirlwind of steel that overwhelmed opponents through sheer technical mastery and ambidextrous coordination. His death at the Tower of Joy ended an era of Kingsguard excellence, and the mantle of Sword of the Morning remained unclaimed for years afterward, as House Dayne found no one worthy to bear Dawn in Arthur's wake. Daemon Blackfyre, born Daemon Waters, the bastard son of King Aegon IV, became one of the most formidable warriors Westeros had ever seen after being legitimized and granted the Valyrian steel sword Blackfyre, from which he took his name when he launched his rebellion. The sword Blackfyre had been the ancestral blade of House Targaryen, carried by Aegon the Conqueror himself, and when Aegon IV gave it to his bastard son instead of his true-born heir, it was seen as tacit acknowledgement of Daemon's superiority as both warrior and potential king. Daemon's martial prowess was legendary, with accounts describing him as having the build and strength of a warrior prince, combined with the charisma and beauty that made men willing to die for him, and during the Battle of the Redgrass Field, he personally slew dozens of loyalist knights. At the Redgrass Field, Daemon led a cavalry charge that smashed through enemy lines with such ferocity that victory seemed certain until Brynden rivers known as Bloodraven killed Daemon's twin sons, Aegon and Aemon, with arrows, causing Daemon to become consumed with rage and grief. In his fury, Daemon sought out Ser Corbray, who wielded the Valyrian steel sword Lady Forlorn, and the two engaged in what witnesses called the greatest duel ever fought on Westerosi soil, with both warriors matching each other blow for blow before Daemon finally overcame his opponent through superior strength and endurance. However, when Daemon broke through the enemy formation to reach Bloodraven, he was struck down by archers firing volley after volley until the warrior prince fell, transforming near certain victory into devastating defeat for the Blackfyre cause. Daemon's legend lived on through multiple subsequent Blackfyre rebellions, with pretenders carrying his name and sword attempting to claim the Iron Throne, though none possessed his combination of martial skill, political legitimacy, and personal magnetism that had nearly torn the Seven Kingdoms apart. Aemon the Dragonknight, considered by many to be the noblest and most skilled knight in Westerosi history, served in the Kingsguard during the reign of his cousin King Aegon IV, and was said to have never tasted defeat in combat, despite fighting in countless battles and tourneys. Prince Aemon's pure white armor and his Valyrian steel blade became symbols of everything. The Kingsguard was meant to represent honor, courage, loyalty, and unmatched martial excellence, even as he served a king who embodied the opposite of these virtues. His devotion to his vows was tested severely, as Aemon was rumored to be in love with his sister Queen Nerys, and she with him. Yet he never broke his oaths despite the constant provocations of the cruel and debauched King Aegon, who took pleasure in tormenting both his wife and his Kingsguard cousin. During the conquest of Dorne, Aemon rescued King Aegon from a sandstone prison using cunning and combat prowess to fight his way through Dornish warriors, despite being vastly outnumbered, cementing his reputation as a warrior who could overcome impossible odds. Aemon's skill with the sword was such that he won countless tourneys and melees throughout his life, often defeating multiple opponents in succession, without suffering so much as a scratch, demonstrating technical mastery that bordered on the supernatural. The manner of his death only added to his legend when he threw himself in front of an assassin's blade meant for King Aegon, dying to protect the man who had tormented him for years, because his vows demanded nothing less than the sacrifice of his own life for his king. In the centuries that followed, Aemon the Dragonknight became the gold standard against which all other knights were measured, with young squires and knights to be dreaming of emulating his perfection, even as the reality of his tragic life was often overlooked in favor of the romantic ideal he represented. Songs and stories about Prince Aemon proliferated throughout Westeros, ensuring that his legacy endured long after House Targaryen fell, with characters like Jaime Lannister measuring themselves against his example and invariably finding themselves wanting. Cregan Stark, the Lord of Winterfell, during the Dance of the Dragons, wielded his ancestral Valyrian steel greatsword Ice with such devastating effectiveness that he became known as one of the most fearsome warriors of his age, despite the stark tendency to avoid the martial glory seeking common among southern knights. When Cregan marched south with an army of northern warriors during the final days of the civil war between Aegon II and Rhaenyra Targaryen, he brought with him the old god's justice and a reputation for martial prowess that made even battle-hardened southerners hesitate. Cregan's physical presence was imposing, standing well over 6 feet tall, with the strength of a man who had spent years training in the harsh conditions of the north, where survival itself required constant readiness for combat against wildlings, raiders, and the unforgiving environment. His most notable display of political and martial authority came during the Hour of the Wolf, when as Hand of the King he arrested and tried those responsible for poisoning King Aegon II, creating a brief period where Cregan's word was law in King's Landing, backed by 20,000 northern sword. Though specific duels and battlefield encounters involving Cregan are less documented than those of southern knights, his reputation was such that few dared challenge him directly, and his ability to command respect through presence alone spoke to an underlying combat ability that matched his political acumen. The greatsword Ice in Cregan's hands was not merely a ceremonial weapon, but an instrument of execution and battle-tested against both wildlings beyond the wall and southern knights who underestimated northern fighting capabilities to their fatal regret. Cregan's refusal to seek personal glory through tourneys and formal duels actually enhanced his reputation as a warrior who fought only when necessary. But when he did fight, he brought absolute commitment and lethality to the encounter, making him more dangerous than knights who treated combat as sport. His legacy influenced subsequent generations of Starks who carried ice into battle, including Eddard Stark, who, while not as physically imposing as his ancestor, inherited the same commitment to duty and willingness to wield his ancestral blade when honor demanded it. Daemon Targaryen, known as the Rogue Prince, wielded the Valyrian steel sword Dark Sister with such skill and ferocity that he became the most feared warrior of his generation, earning both admiration and terror from those who witnessed his combat prowess. Unlike many great swordsmen who relied on defensive technique or pure strength, Daemon combined exceptional skill with an aggressive, almost reckless fighting style that saw him charging headlong into danger, whether on the ground or mounted on his dragon character. During the War for the Stepstones, Daemon personally led countless raids and battles against the Triarchy, earning the title King of the Narrow Sea through a combination of dragon-powered aerial assaults and brutal ground combat, where he cut down enemy commanders in single combat. His duel with Ser Criston Cole during a tourney celebrating Princess Rhaenyra's accession as heir demonstrated his ability to defeat even the finest knights in the realm, as he dismounted Cole and forced the future kingmaker to yield in front of the assembled court. Daemon's martial accomplishments extended beyond formal combat as he served as commander of the City Watch in King's Landing, where he personally trained the Gold Cloaks and led them in brutal suppression of crime, wielding Dark Sister to execute thieves and rapists in the streets without trial. The defining moment of Daemon's warrior legacy came during the battle above the God's Eye, where at age 49 he leaped from his dragon caraxes onto Vhagar, the largest dragon in the world, to engage his nephew Aemon in mortal combat thousands of feet in the air. As both dragons plummeted toward the lake, Daemon drove Dark Sister through Aemon's remaining eye, killing his nephew and ensuring both their deaths in what became the most legendary feat of combat in Targaryen history, combining dragon riding skill with suicidal courage and supreme swordsmanship. Daemon's willingness to embrace violence and his utter fearlessness in the face of death made him the embodiment of Targaryen exceptionalism at its most dangerous, with his legacy serving as both inspiration and warning about the costs of unchecked martial ambition. Jaime Lannister in his prime before losing his sword hand was considered by many to be the finest swordsman alive in Westeros, combining natural talent, years of dedicated training, and real combat experience that few knights could match. From his youth, Jaime demonstrated prodigious ability with a blade being knighted at 15 by Ser Arthur Dayne himself after showing exceptional courage and skill during the battle against the Kingswood Brotherhood, where he saved Lord Summer Crakehall from the Smiling Knight. At 16, Jaime became the youngest member of the Kingsguard in history, appointed by the Mad King Aerys in part to spite Tywin Lannister, but also because the young knight's abilities were undeniable even to a paranoid monarch. Jaime's defining moment came when he slew King Aerys II, earning him the derisive title Kingslayer, but also demonstrating his willingness to act decisively, even when it meant breaking the most sacred of oaths to prevent the destruction of King's Landing through wildfire. His reputation as a swordsman reached its peak during Robert's Rebellion and the subsequent years, where he regularly defeated all challengers in tourneys, and was said to be so fast that opponents often didn't realize they'd been struck until they saw their own blood. Sir Barristan Selmy, who served alongside Jaime in the Kingsguard, noted that the young lion was perhaps the most naturally gifted swordsman he'd ever seen, though he lamented that Jaime's arrogance and lack of true commitment to his vows prevented him from reaching his full potential as a knight. When Jaime fought against the Stark forces following his capture of Eddard Stark, he personally killed multiple northern soldiers, including Eddard's guards, demonstrating that his reputation was built on genuine combat ability rather than tourney success against fellow knights pulling their strike. His duel with Brienne of Tarth while he was starved, weakened, and in chains showed that even in diminished condition, Jaime's technique and experience nearly overcame Brienne's superior strength and conditioning before exhaustion finally claimed him. The loss of his sword hand transformed Jaime from the supremely confident Golden Warrior into a man forced to find value beyond his martial prowess, yet his legacy as one of the greatest swordsmen Westeros had produced remained undimmed by his physical disability. Sir Duncan the Tall, despite his humble origins as a hedge knight, rose to become Lord Commander of the Kingsguard through a combination of exceptional combat ability, unwavering courage, and a code of honor that earned him the respect of kings and common folk alike. Standing nearly 7 feet tall and wielding a sword to match his considerable reach, Duncan possessed physical advantages that he combined with surprisingly refined technique, learned from his mentor Ser Arlen of Pennytree, to become a formidable warrior capable of defeating knights from the greatest houses. Duncan's martial prowess was first demonstrated at the tourney at Ashford Meadow, where despite his inexperience, he held his own against seasoned knights, and later defeated Prince Aemon Targaryen in trial by combat, saving the life of a puppet player named Tansel and establishing himself as a knight of genuine ability. Throughout his adventures, Duncan engaged in numerous combats, including the rebellion at White Walls, where he fought against rebels attempting to crown Daemon Blackfyre II, and at the Redgrass Fields Aftermath, where he helped suppress remaining resistance to the crown. His size and strength allowed Duncan to wield heavier armor and weapons than most knights, while his training emphasized straightforward, powerful strikes that could break through defenses rather than the fancy footwork and elaborate techniques favored by Southron knights. Despite lacking a Valyrian steel sword or formal training at a great lord's castle, Duncan's combination of physical attributes, practical experience, and natural talent made him the equal of knights who had enjoyed far greater advantages in their upbringing. Duncan's greatest feat came during the tragedy at Summerhall, where he died attempting to save members of the royal family during the fire that claimed multiple Targaryens, demonstrating that his courage and commitment to protecting others remained undiminished even unto death. His legacy lived on through his squire Egg, who became King Aegon V, and through the continued service of his descendants, who carried on the tradition of honor and martial excellence that Duncan embodied. In the century that followed Duncan's death, his legend grew, with small folk and knights alike remembering the tall knight who proved that true nobility came from one's actions rather than one's birth, and that exceptional warrior skill could emerge from the most humble origins. And there you have it, the 8 greatest swordsmen in the history of Westeros, from the Honorable Barristan, the bold who served kings for over 40 years, to the towering Duncan, the tall who rose from hedge knight to Lord Commander through pure skill and courage. These warriors shaped the course of Westerosi history through their prowess with the blade, whether wielding legendary swords like Dawn and Dark Sister, or earning their reputations through countless battles and tourneys that tested their abilities against the finest fighters the Seven Kingdoms could produce. Each of these men brought something unique to the art of swordsmanship, whether it was Arthur Dayne's unmatched technique, Daemon Targaryen's fearless aggression, or Jaime Lannister's natural talent combined with years of dedicated training. Their legacies continue to inspire and influence the knights and warriors who came after them, setting standards of martial excellence that subsequent generations have struggled to match, let alone exceed. Let us know in the comments below which Westerosi swordsman you think deserves to be on this list, and what other A Song of Ice and Fire content you want us to cover.